Welcome to the first 2020 Westfield State Representative Candidate Forum. I'm Brian Richards, and I am the president of the Westfield Taxpayers Association. We are proud to host this event, and we hope it helps we learn about the candidates and whom you'll be voting for in November. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Westfield Bank, and also like to thank Community Access TV, especially the folks behind the TV here. Peter Coles and Kenny Stomsky. Our moderators for tonight are former City Councilor Agnes Sweeney and TV host and former Westfield News owner Patrick Berry. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Let's get started so we can hear from the candidates. The format of tonight's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement and another 2 minutes for closing remarks at the end. There will be 3 questions that all candidates will answer. They will have 90 seconds each. The candidates will rotate answering 2 round-robin questions. They will have 90 seconds to answer their question. The other candidates will have 45 seconds to respond. Where it's appropriate, we will allow a 30-second response. Your candidates tonight are Independent Ethan Flaherty, Democrat Matthew Garlow, and Republican Kelly Pease. Good evening, candidates. It's time for your opening statements.
Mr. Flaherty, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sweeney. Hi, I'm Ethan, your independent candidate for Westfield's state representative seat. First, I want to take the opportunity to thank the Taxpayers Association, Westfield Bank, and Westfield Community Television. I know a ton of work went into making this event a reality, so that the people of Westfield could have a good look at their candidates. So thank you to everybody, moderators, people behind the camera, setup work, a million things went into this. So thank you. Next, thankfully, between the 3 of us, it's been nothing but respectful and friendly so far. So I want to take the opportunity to thank both of you guys. I'm sure talking with both of you, we won't have a problem keeping it that way, which is a relief for everyone, I think. Mr. Pease, I know you served in the military, so thank you for service. It's an honor being next to someone who's served our country in that way, so thank you. In Westfield, we know that what works is engaging directly with people, and I'm really glad my experience with this as a candidate so far has been really positive. And I've learned something from everybody that I've talked to. I've talked with people about everything from healthcare to governmental usage of drones. That was a really fun one, actually. And so for everyone who's interacted with me, huge thank you for confirming that running for state representative was the right choice to connect with and help people. So in the next hour or so, I'm expecting we'll be sharing a little background on why we're running, who we are as candidates and people, some of our positions and so forth. I know that I'm going to keep working hard to gain your vote, to gain your confidence, and I'm going to continue sticking to my values and efforts to be someone who unites us. I'm very hopeful that by the end, I'll have gained some of your support, and I just ask that you unbiasedly consider all the candidates and seek out information, interact with us, and make a decision based on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gallo, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hi, my name is Matt Garlow, and I'm running for state rep because with some education and experience, you really get to understand how much politics, the thing we call politics, affects your family's lives, your neighbors' lives. I may have legislative experience in Albany and Washington, D.C., but at the end of the day, I know that my impact can be maximized in my own community, in my own hometown. So that is why I would like to run for state rep, and it is because that has been confirmed in the time since I announced my candidacy, because I've gotten to see a new side of Westfield that is entirely different than the one I knew as a kid growing up, where we really do have some improvements to make, and we do need unity to achieve those, whether that be in our hometown or in Boston. I'm ready for more politicians to listen and learn along the trail, along their time of service. And that is what I would be doing for Westfield. That's what I already have been doing in Westfield on this campaign. Whether it be meeting with the superintendent about our upcoming school year, taking Department of Public Works tours to learn more about our water that too many of us hear about but don't actually see the reality of. I've been doing that, or whether it be walking up to 200 miles so far as I have been canvassing in Westfield thus far. Heard lots of issues, heard lots of ways we can improve. Some I already knew, some I didn't, but that is what I've been doing along the way, listening and learning. Especially at the local level, I think it's a privilege to be disinterested in politics these days, and that is why I am very interested in it, because these are our schools. Politics is alive in our schools. They're alive in our careers. They're alive in our options for care in Westfield. And myself and my family have absolutely faced a lot of those problems, and I would like to solve them, or attempt to, for Westfield.
Great. Okay, Mr. Pease, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Hello. First, I would like to thank the Taxpayer Association for sponsoring this event and Channel 15 for hosting it. Also, I'd like to thank the moderators and the citizens of Westfield who are watching tonight to learn more about us. And of course, I'd like to thank my opponents, Ethan and Matt. And again, I hope that we have a great campaign. I am Kelly Pease, candidate for state representative. I was born right here in Westfield at Noble Hospital, but I grew up in the hill towns. And as a young adult, I became interested in serving my community. I was a volunteer fireman, a part-time police officer going through the Agawam Reserve Academy, and was elected selectman to this town of Chester before joining the military. In the military, I served in military intelligence, and I retired as an officer after 20 years on active duty. During that time, I traveled the globe in support of United States missions. I know how to interact and deal with not only different services, but I've represented the U.S. in dealing with foreign governments like South Korea, Romania, Kuwait, Britain, Canada, and Australia. I have the experience of working with various people to accomplish the necessary goals. After I retired, my family and I moved to Westfield, where I attended Westfield State University and earned a second bachelor's degree in political science, earning a 4.0 GPA. And then I worked at the VA hospital in Leeds, supporting nursing services. And after that, I went to Western New England University, where I received a Master of Law degree. Last year, I worked for our former state senator. I went to Boston and learned the inner workings of the State House and how to help constituents with bureaucratic roadblocks. I look forward to taking my experience to work for you on Beacon Hill. I am not a polished politician, but I bring a ton of experience to this position, and I can only promise you that I will work hard for you and the city of Westfield in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you all. Here's the first question for each of you. We will start with Mr. Garlow, and you will each have 90 seconds to respond. Mr. Garlow, do you feel Westfield receives our fair share of transportation-related tax funding from the state for road, bridges, and sidewalk repair?
So that is a question that is valid, but it's always tough to answer because we'll never maybe get 100% of what we would like. I would absolutely strive for that as someone who hears the concerns about our roads and whatnot. And if there were infrastructure-related bills where I had an opportunity to capitalize on that, I would absolutely be interested in doing so. At the same time, we are in an era right now where we kind of have to recalibrate our thoughts on things and our priorities because COVID has hit things hard, like our schools. We know that we received full Chapter 70 funding this year, which is absolutely a positive, but going forward, we need to make sure that happens because unfortunately there will be a lot of holes in the next year or so, long after I were to take office. There's always room to be made up on what we can receive for our roads, and I will always be in the talks and in the mix about those, about that room to be made up. But at the same time, we really have to look around at our health care, our treatment options that people around here are still sick and in need of, and things like our schools and water that also must be thought of in a time like this too. I will always be interested in making sure Westfield drivers are all set, but there are many other priorities to think of now too.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Pease, same question to you. You will have 90 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Do you feel Westfield receives our fair share of transportation-related tax funding from the state for road, bridge, and sidewalk repair? You have 90 seconds.
So the easy answer is absolutely not. Right now, with the gas tax and Chapter 90 funds, the state takes in they did take in last year $769 million. And out of that $769 million, the cities and towns got $200 million of it. So we get about a quarter of what they take in gas tax distributed to the 351 cities and towns. Westfield did receive $1.2 million of that money, but out of the roads in the state, the cities and towns make up about 30,000 miles, where in the whole state it's 37,000. So they make up about 70% of the roads in this state, and yet they get about 25% of the money. That needs to be a reprioritization for the state to spend that money better for the cities and towns, so they don't have to raise our property taxes every year, and we have better roads to drive on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, same question. You have 90 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, it's all right. Thank you. All right. So the easy answer is the way that we get Chapter 90 funding for roads is a set formula. So state representatives can't actually advocate for more money from that. But what we can do is advocate to increase the Chapter 90 funding across the state from the $200 million number that Mr. Pease just mentioned to anywhere from $500 to $700 million, which the Mass Municipal Association would like, and a lot of people in town, including myself, would like. Okay. So I don't think that we're receiving enough for our roads and infrastructure, but it is fair. It's not like we're getting gypped out. It's just not enough across the state. Too much of the money is going to other places. I had something good to say.
That's okay. If you're done, you're done. That's all right.
All right. I'll remember.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So the next question. So here's the first set of round robin questions. For this one, Mr. Gallo will answer and others will have a short response. So Mr. Garlow, yes, I know. This year is the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. What will you do as Westfield State Representative to promote equality in the workplace?
I would do anything I could to promote equality in the workplace. I think that Massachusetts has already certified themselves as a leader in this category among many other forward-looking ones where I can respect that, and I can certainly get on board with that. I actually made a big post about the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage as well, and it's unfortunate that not all women were included in that, as took until the Civil Rights Act for African American women to receive that same right as many others were granted much earlier. But I would do anything I can to advance the presence of women in the workplace, and also their not only their presence at any level, but at the higher levels of workplaces and corporations, public administration, anything like that, non-elected, of course. But I would absolutely be behind that, and that is something that is almost second nature in Massachusetts already, in my opinion. Obviously, there will always be room to improve, and I'd be happy to be in the room making those improvements in the State House. But as I said, Massachusetts has been a leader, will continue to be a leader on those issues and women's rights, and I would absolutely love to be a part of advancing those.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, 45 seconds, please.
Okay. 45?
Yes, would you like me to repeat the question?
Okay. No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In Massachusetts, like Mr. Garlow said, we're already one of the leaders, and there are still ongoing efforts to promote equality. I know I was just reading one about insurance, how when you're insured by your employer, it has to be equal amounts for men and women, but privately, if you're insuring yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be. So there are still room for improvement And thankfully in Massachusetts, we had the right to vote, or women had the right to vote in Massachusetts. I believe it was 25 years before the 19th Amendment was passed. So we've been doing well since the start, and I plan to continue to promote equality and justice.
Thank you. Mr. Pease, 45 seconds.
Yes, I mean, we've come a long way since 1948 in Seneca Falls, New York, where Elizabeth Stanton had their first meeting to advocate for it. And then later, obviously, teaming up with Susan B. Anthony from Massachusetts to form a league and get it forward. I mean, they tried to get it through with the 14th and 15th Amendments for when the African Americans were given the right to vote, but unsuccessful until finally the 1920s. And in Wyoming was the first one, and the first woman elected to Congress in 1917, Miss Rankin. Obviously that was a huge event, and we've continued to move that movement, especially in the last few years, and we need to keep it going as well.
Okay, thank you.
This question is for you, Mr. Garlow. You will have 90 seconds. Mr. Pease and Mr. Flaherty, you'll have 45. Westfield and other communities have a growing problem with opioids. As Westfield's state representative, what would you do to help address this crisis?
This crisis, which it truly is, and it doesn't have any end in sight, is absolutely very close to my family, my neighbors, lots of people who I know in Westfield, and it does extend out through entire family trees, unfortunately, and it's something that we absolutely need to be proactive about, investing in treatment, investing in services that fight the crisis that is addiction, and whether that be Massachusetts keeping an eye out, which not necessarily a job of a state representative, keeping an eye about painkiller prescriptions, making sure that those aren't always the starting point of addictions like this, because they often, too many times are, or also just bringing home that funding for treatment and other services. I would absolutely be front and center on situations like that. In fact, I would absolutely look to be on the committee for substance abuse, because that is something that in Hampden County, through the sheriff's office, we've definitely been proactive about, and I would absolutely continue to do that in the legislature, because like I said, I have seen too many people that I'm close to and neighbors and things and people like that in Westfield suffer, and it's not firsthand suffering. Offering it is secondhand as well, sending through family and friends. But I would be proactive on this issue always.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Pease, you were to follow up with 45 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I'm okay. Mr. Garlow was spot on an answer there. This affects everybody. I have family members that have been affected by this, and it's key to make sure we have the treatment. And again, I know the Sheriff's Department has set up some great programs, but we need to follow up. And the big thing is that we have to make sure that the prescription drugs are controlled, which I know they are better today than they were before, but we still need to keep a good handle on how that's controlled, because it's an issue and it needs to be addressed and looked at and taken care of seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Pease. Mr. Flaherty, you have 45 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
That's all right, thank you. So in Westfield, this is a huge issue, and in Westfield, we typically lose 10 to 15 people per year, which is even 20, which is incredibly high, and everybody's affected by it. In my class, part of one of a project that we worked on was painting a mural to raise awareness about this just off of Meadow Street. And the truth is that 75% of people who are addicted to opioids started on prescriptions, and that's absolutely part of the state representative's job to help with that with legislation, because it really is an astronomical number that start off of prescriptions.
Okay. This round-robin question is for Mr. Pease, then the others will respond. Westfield has a problem with water contamination. What are your thoughts on how this has been addressed? And what will you do as Westfield's state representative to keep the costs of monitoring and cleanup of toxic chemicals from becoming a greater financial burden on the taxpayers?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, especially here in Westfield. Well, I mean, the current situation we find ourselves in is that we had contamination in wells 7 and 8 and also 1 and 2. And currently, I talked to the city water engineer, and wells 7 and 8 are up and running, and they're testing, are not showing any PFAS in the water after it goes through the filtration system and enters the Westfield water system. So that's a good news story there. Wells 1 and 2 are still in the planning phases, and they're about at 95% complete right now, based on the success from wells 7 and 8. But right now, they're currently trying to secure and acquire a 0% interest loan to help finish the build out for that and connect all the pipes. So, as a state representative, I would definitely advocate for that to allow our city to get that money, and I'd also advocate for us to pressure the federal government, because it's basically based from the fire foam and everything that caused it years ago. So they need to pay their fair share as well. It was good to see that Governor Baker put up some money in the legislature last year to help the cities and towns that are dealing with PFAS issues. But you know what? PFAS is a dangerous thing, and it causes a lot of sickness. So we got to stay on top of it, and we got to provide what we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flaherty, same question, 45 seconds.
Okay, perfect. So I, in addition to supporting the efforts to clean it up, we actually aren't testing enough at all. We have at least 6 known PFAS in Westfield water that we aren't even testing for with EPA. I believe it's 37 or something. 537. I'm not sure. We need to increase the funding for testing to figure out what exactly is happening to us. We've been being poisoned for years, potentially poisoned for years, and we need to understand the health effects and hold the people liable. I support the efforts against 3M, and the truth is that all federal, state, and local are partially responsible. So, we need to clean it up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Flaherty. Mr. Gallo, same question.
So as I said, I took a tour with the DPW early on in this campaign because not only my generation, but Westfield is fired up about this issue, understandably and rightfully, and I can be a leader on this issue. I would immediately try to join the informal PFAS caucus in the legislature, which has been formed recently due to the seriousness of these issues finally being noticed. Senator John Velas wrote an amendment in the last year's budget that is attempting to have the state acknowledge that we are owed some reimbursement that will go to testing and that will go to treatment options. And I would absolutely be one to shepherd that through, because this is something that needs cooperation in the legislature, and I would step into a spot where I could immediately form partnerships to get it done.
Thank you so much.
This is the second question for all of you, which we will each have 90 seconds to answer. Mr. Pease, we will start with you. What, if any, endorsements or funding have you accepted from political parties, unions, political action committees, or other groups? And how do you feel this support affects you and Westfield residents and businesses? You have 90 seconds.
Before we start my time, if I need to use my rebuttal at the end of it,
Raise your flag.
I would like to just keep going, and I'm raising my flag now, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay. I would like to continue because we can't rebuttal until they're all done.
Correct. Right. So you have 90 seconds.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. Well, political action committees are independent and by law have no contact with the candidate or the candidate's committee. And I have never accepted or received money from PACs because it's illegal, and I've never talked to anybody. You know what? Candidates on this stage are probably going to receive help from outside groups in this next election. It happens all the time without their knowledge or without my knowledge. It happens from gun groups, teacher unions, labor unions, and many others. And during this last primary election, this came up, and I talked to Dan Alley on the phone a couple times during this campaign, and he never raised any concerns with me. And Dan and his supporters were telling my supporters throughout the day of the election I did a great job and I'd be great for city council. Well, maybe Dan should have taken me more seriously. He declined to debate right here at Channel 15 or to go on Rock 102 for an interview. He did none of those things, and yet he blames 2 mailers for this last election. And everybody was receiving many mailers from Neal, Markey, Morris, and Kennedy at that time. The Westfield voters are smarter than that. I've knocked on over 2,000 doors, advertised, stood out almost every morning, and once a week had a big standout. During the primary election, I worked harder or as hard as any other candidate, and to have Dan Alley question my character, honesty, integrity is wrong. And if I have to continue my rebuttal, I will later.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pease. Mr. Flaherty, you as well will have 90 seconds. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No. So I haven't received any money or endorsements, and I don't intend to from the very start. Everything that I've had has said specifically at the bottom, paid for by committee to elect Ethan Flaherty, not political parties or special interest groups. And I think that's very important because as candidates, we're berated with special interest groups that are trying to get us to answer a set of questions, that are trying to get us to promise them things. And I don't have any of it. I don't answer any of those. I refuse to. And I think that's very, very important. And again, I'm with Mr. Pease. I think that he did everything right, and he had nothing. So I just like to acknowledge that he did nothing wrong in the last election as well.
Mr. Flaherty, we still have a little bit of time. I'd like a follow-up question. What will you do if someone tries to donate to your committee?
For who?
From any of those categories?
Well, I won't accept it, especially if it's from a political party.
Very good.
Not that anyone would gift me.
Mr. Garlow, you have 90 seconds for the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I'm all set. Thank you. So my campaign has not received any funds from anyone either, any outside group at all. I am endorsed by the MTA because that is my interest in our schools, but that transcends the MTA. I've actually sent probably 2 emails to them in total, and I've been in contact with our Westfield Education Association much, much more because I know the struggles that they are facing, both our teachers, educators of all kinds, and our students in returning back to school this year. It's a unique scenario, and it requires someone who can be on their toes as far as that goes, and I will be that person as well. I know the struggle of being a first-time candidate who doesn't have necessarily name notoriety, and you are approached by plenty of others, and I would take that on a case-by-case basis on my campaign because you can do some research and really tell what an organization is about or where this money would be coming from and whatnot. As I said, I have accepted none, and this campaign is fueled by individual contributors in Westfield, and it's been a low-budget one for sure, so I understand the struggles of getting the name out there, but that doesn't weaken my message at all. And anyone who were to reach out, they're buying into my message, so that is where I stand on this.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Pease has indicated he would like his 30-second rebuttal time.
Thank you. And again, I just resent being that my character, honesty, integrity were questioned during this last election. And you know what? I don't know if Dan and I thought he was owed the state representative position, but he wasn't just because he's a counselor, a lifelong politician, or the chairman of the Republican Party. You know, it's up to the Westfield voters to decide, and they saw how hard I worked, and they humbled me with a win. You know, that's one reason why I love Westfield, because we don't like dirty politics, and what Dan is doing right now is dirty. I am the nominee, and I'm an honest and integrity person. Thank you.
Back to the round-robin questions, and this is for Mr. Flaherty, with a shorter response from the other candidates, so 90 seconds, 45, 45. Westfield and many other cities and towns are approaching their Proposition 2.5 levy ceiling. How would you propose the state address this?
Well, I don't think that the state should address it by raising Prop 2.5 to Prop 3. I think that the real issue is that how much our property values are or aren't going up, and I'm not really sure what way to address it other than raising. I'm not sure.
So maybe you can come back after the others have spoken. Okay. So Mr. Garlow, sorry.
So I would definitely be in discussion for any way that the state were strategizing on how we could put off or correct the levy ceiling at the state level. But I would encourage everyone to read about Pittsfield, who reached this scenario a few years before us, and even their own finance director said this is not as simple as raising values or cutting budgets. We need to create reserves and a surplus, and that is something that is done municipally and not at the legislative level. So while I said I would be listening to constituents and in the discussion room about how we could change this from the state level, that is something we do need to work out at the city level first.
Okay. Mr. Pease, same question?
Yes, I mean, right now, we take in 2020, we're scheduled to take in $76,484,000 in property taxes, and again, as a homeowner in this city, I know how much I pay in property taxes every year. So our levy limit is just over $81 million. So we are getting close to it, but we need to, first of all, like I said before, have the state reprioritize how they spend their money to provide for the cities and towns more money and not just spend on new programs without taking care of our core programs first. So I think that would help go a long ways in alleviating our levy limit problem.
This next question is for you, Mr. Flaherty. You will have 90 seconds. The others will have 45. Where do you stand on the issue of police department reform and the call to redirect funding to social programs?
Yeah, thank you. I do support our police and all the great work that they do. I do think that there are some reforms that should be passed. I don't think that police should be able to investigate themselves, for example, which might not be the most popular amongst them, but I believe that there should be an outside group doing that. I support efforts to have centralized reporting for all use of force statistics and stuff at the state level, and that those efforts are happening now. And it's not enough just to have the aggregate data. We need to be able to compare department to department to see which policies work and which ones don't. So that's kind of where I stand on it. So I support the police, but I also think that there is work to be done.
Mr. Garlow, you have 45 seconds for the same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, please.
Where do you stand on the issue of police department reform and the call to redirect funding to social programs?
So this is an issue that's obviously been front and center and quite divisive recently in our country, but the key word there is in our country. And I would be one who can certainly acknowledge, as many of the prideful members of Westfield Police Department would, that in certain places in this country there are wrong practices going on that create incidents, that create headlines, and create awful changes in lives, much more than headlines. But that being said, this is a unique seat where we are only representing Westfield, and until those things are brought to my attention in our own Westfield Police Department, I would have to address them then, because as of now, Westfield is not Minneapolis or some of these other cities we're seeing in the news.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Pease, same question. You have 45 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I'm good, and that was a great question. Thank you. I mean, it is forefront in the news today. And you know what? Our Westfield Police Department do an outstanding job. I know a number of them, and they work really hard to make sure they're getting the job done. And as for redirecting funding to social programs, I would be totally against that. If the police department has their budget, it needs to be spent within their budget. Now, if the police department would like to reallocate some of that funding to help have some more mental health personnel come out on some calls with them to deal with some of the drug or mental health issues they're dealing with out there, where maybe a civilian on the scene would be better and less threatening to them than a uniformed police, but the uniformed police still needs to be close by because it could be a dangerous position.
Okay. The final round robin question is for Mr. Pease, with a time for response from the other candidates. Western Massachusetts is losing local farms. Do you support government incentives to sustain our local farms? Mr. Pease.
Well, I would say that's an excellent question because I did not expect a question about losing local farms. So, but I would support our farms. Our farms are key to providing food. I mean, even you go to Big Y, they are big about buying local and everything, and that sustains us. I mean, what it is. I have family members that have had farms and many cows that were used for milking and everything, and it's a big deal to have that and to be a part of us, because we need to have our own food here, especially if things ever go really bad. You want to have local farmers, and we need to have that. We can't just farm that out to the big conglomerates. So I would be probably for it. I'd have to look at it some more, because I'm not up to speed on where the funding is or how bad a plight they're in right now. But I would definitely lean initially towards helping and supporting our local farmers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Flaherty, same question?
Sure. I also, it's the, okay.
Yes.
I also support our local farms. And yeah, look, I get a lot of food locally, and I think it's important that everybody should. And the truth is there's a lot of waste at these huge farms. We need to address that. And we need to help our local farmers. Yeah,
Yes, thank you. Mr. Garlow, same
would-
question.
I would absolutely support these initiatives as well. What I will say is that certainly at the federal level, we need to step up in this category. I would need to look at our state possibilities for assistance as well to see exactly what I could do. But certainly we could use a lot more help at the federal level on this. But I would happily go directly to the farmers, the ones like Pomeroy's, Kaczynski's that I grew up right down the road from. Those are near and dear to not only my heart, but all of Westfield, and I absolutely understand that. As both of the candidates said, local grown is definitely a positive thing for all of us, and we need to always make sure that that supply is there, and that whether in times like these or even better times economically, that our farmers definitely have the backs of the state and have help.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garlow. This third question is for each of you. 90-second response time. We'll start with you, Mr. Flaherty. What do you propose the state do to ensure a quality education for all students in all schools, remote, home, charter, parochial, private, and public, during this time of COVID-19 and moving forward?
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Look, I think the most important thing right off the bat is continuing to educate kids with IEPs, special needs, and ELL students. We know that they're going back to school first, I believe, and I think that's hugely important. We need to just keep moving forward. Obviously, nothing is set in stone yet, and everything's up in the air, but I know that teachers are doing the best that they can, and I think that we need to keep going forward with that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Mr. Garlow, same question, 90 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, we were lucky that Chapter 70 funding came in full to Westfield this year, and if there were issues with that going forward, unfortunately, as we look at relief bills for really the next year, unfortunately, then I would also be there to reassure that that happens again and that it keeps moving up as it should be. As a Southampton Road, North Middle, and Westfield High alumni, I guess you could say, the public schools and all other schools are in Westfield. They're near and dear to my heart as well. Ethan made a great point about special needs students because they certainly need any amount of extra care possible in times like these. And it's unfortunate that sometimes government funding can get in the way of that because these are lives, these are real lives that matter, and they are ones that can't lose this time that they need for progress. Another thing with remote learning is that childcare loops into this conversation out of nowhere when it normally wouldn't because kids aren't at school, so we always need to keep an eye on that too, as I would in the legislature. School staff are doing an amazing job with this, and they'll continue to because they're doing this because it's their passion in life. It's not a quick buck. It's not a way to strike it rich, and they are working their butts off right now, and I'd be there with them.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Garlow. Mr. Pease, 90 seconds to you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What do you propose the state do to ensure a quality education for all students in all schools, whether it be remote, home, charter, parochial, private, and public, during this time of COVID-19 and moving forward?
Well, I think the state just needs to provide the necessary like PPEs and guidance to the local cities and towns. It's pretty much up to the local school districts to manage their school systems, and I think Westfield does a great job. I mean, these are challenging times. We have kids that are, one teacher yesterday, I was told by somebody, had asked that they'd like to talk to their parent after a class one time, and the kids were piping up saying, I'm at the Boys and Girls Club, I'm at the YMCA, I'm at Grandma and Grandpa's house, I'm over a friend's house, my cousin's house. It's trying times, and everybody's trying to cope with it. It's not an easy piece, and the school system's doing the best they can to keep ours safe. And I trust them. I have a son in 3rd grade at Southampton Road Elementary School. Well, he's at home, but he's taking Google Classroom, and that's another thing. All the grandparents and parents have to learn how to use Google Classroom. It's a challenging time. The state just needs to support them, but it's up to them. The only thing I would caution is that the state should not be maybe mandating so much. They need to put out the guidelines, because every city and town is different with the COVID-19 issue. Some on the east are worse off than us here. I mean, we did have a little spike this last week, but they need to be able to manage it based on their current situation in their city or town, and the state needs to support that in whatever way they can.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We now have some final lighter questions for all of you, and you can take up to 45 seconds to answer. And I'm going to start with Mr. Pease again. So, who is your favorite historical figure, and what do you admire about them?
Oh, geez, there's so many. You know what? Especially being interested in politics, and I wouldn't say there's one, but I would say like the founding fathers. So, I mean, I would really, if I could meet anybody, when they're going through that process, and just have a conversation with our founding fathers to hear what's really in their mind and what their thought process were when they established this great country. I mean, what they laid the foundation for is incredible. I mean, this is the greatest country on earth, and it was an experiment, and that's working out very well. And I think that would be, yep, absolutely. That's who I think I would have to sit down and meet if I had the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Garlow, same question.
So this is an easy, might be basic, but an easy one, because it's Martin Luther King Jr. And not only in times like this, but in any time of American history, you can see the respect shown for a man like that, who in the face of opposition, in the face of pure hatred, in the face of a world literally working against him, kept moving because he knew it was just, he knew it was right, and learned from every single person he met along the way to create a better world, to the point that people hated him for that. So that's someone that I absolutely admire, because I won't be turning down any battles, and much more than I ever could, he certainly never did.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, same question.
Sure. So I'm not sure if this is my top person, but it's the one that came to mind first, just because of a quote. It's Gandhi. It's "Be the change you wish to see in the world." You've all heard it. I'm certainly trying to live by it. So that's the reason that he came to mind, was because that quote was kind of in my head before this. That's why I'm running, is because I want to make a difference, and yeah.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
The next question, again, for all three of you, 45 seconds response. We'll start with you, Mr. Flaherty. Who is your favorite teacher or adult volunteer that has impacted your life, and why?
Sure. I would probably have to say Mr. O'Neill at Westfield High School. He's a history teacher, and I really appreciate his take on things. He would oftentimes get up at class and kind of let us help run it, and we would bounce things back and forth, and it would end up being really interesting discussions, and he was always ready there to help students with whatever they needed. So maybe him. So thanks, Mr. O'Neill.
Very good. Mr. Pease, same question, 45 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, a favorite teacher, I mean, I had so many great teachers, but one thing stood out in my mind, and it was a 5th grade teacher called Mr. Boucher, and he basically, we were learning capitalism, socialism, and communism, and he was like, "Well, socialism's like if the country takes over the train system," and of course being a fifth grader, I'm like, "Well, that sounds like a great idea." And he turned to me and said, "You know what? Go home and talk to your parents about that night." He wasn't preaching about his views or whatever. And of course, I go home and my father says, "What do you mean they can't even run the post office?" But he was a great, just because of the way he dealt with that question and answer. And volunteer, I got to say, Rosie, this older lady that stands out with me just about every morning, but she's volunteered all throughout the city over the course of time, and she's just a great lady.
Thank you. Mr. Garlow, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you. This is an easy one for me, and if he's not watching right now, I'll definitely have to put his attention towards it. But mine is definitely Mr. Bill Daly, because not only was he sociology teacher at the high school, which I ended up being one of my majors in college at the college that he went to, Siena College, after his advice and a few extra scholarships, I made that decision. But he was also my basketball coach, and that was someone who both knew my potential academically and otherwise in the world, and he lit a fire under me when I needed it. And oftentimes we all need someone who can do that, but who can crack a joke at the end of the day too. So I've always appreciated those values he has, and definitely a man of the people, so I'm sure others would agree.
Okay, and this is probably not going to take you 45 seconds to answer, but I'll start with Mr. Garlow. Do you play a musical instrument?
I do not. That'll be much less than 45 seconds because not musically talented. I will admit that happily. Guess I can only remember the recorder in second grade or whatever it was.
Okay.
That's really it.
Mr. Flaherty, do you play a musical instrument?
Yes, I've been playing the piano for probably maybe a dozen years now, and loved every second of it. Kind of taken a break from practicing so much the past couple months, but I'm sure I'll get back to it soon.
No, I do not. But I have a 8-year-old that as he tells us, forcing him to take piano for the last few years. So that's a struggle, but I hope he learns to love it like Ethan did. And that's what we're hoping. I mean, because, we're not, my wife and I aren't as musically inclined, and we wanted him to have something like that because I think that's a good thing to know how to do.
Very good. Another question for all three of you, 45-second response time. We're going to start with you, Mr. Pease. Tell us something about you that would make your grandmother proud.
Well, my grandmother, well, how about my mother? Because I never really knew my grandmothers.
Fair enough.
and I lost my mother a few years ago. But I think right now just running for this office and doing the good job I'm doing and just the person I am. I mean, I think overall, I mean, first of all, my mother gave me great experiences, whether it was when she allowed me to be a child actor, going to New York when I was young, or just give me advice when I was looking to join the military, and I think she would just be, I know she was proud of who I am and what I'm doing today and running and the person I am. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Garlow, same question to you, 45 seconds. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I'm all set. Thank you. So, luckily, definitely very luckily, I know that both of my grandmothers are here right now and proud of me for doing this because they're standing out with the signs too. Even if be in masks, they are making it out, and they were there on the primary, and they will be there going forward. But my grandmother will be proud of me because of my grandpa's values, who was luckily moved from the Soldiers' Home to Holyoke Medical Center in the awful wave of COVID that went through there. Never tested positive. Very thankful for that. And while he might not be able to see all of this in live action, she is so happy for me because I am putting his values into action here in Westfield, and I'll only continue to do that as a rep.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, thank you. I think both my grandparents are proud that I'm an Eagle Scout. My grandmother that lives here in Westfield was certainly very helpful along the way and pushed me a lot to get it. So I think that she'd definitely be proud about that. They're also proud about the people that I'm friends with. They love meeting them and saying, "Oh, your friends are such great people." So probably that too. I just like to add, on the last thing about the musical instrument, a thank you to my piano teacher for the first maybe 6 years, Mrs. Baldwin. I know I put her through a lot with not practicing and so forth and having a tough time the first couple of years. So thank you, Mrs. Baldwin.
Of course, not a rebuttal. I just wanted to add a little on mine as well.
Go ahead, you have a few seconds.
Other than my grandfather in the soldiers' home, I know that my Nana is definitely proud of me as Richard Hills looks down on us, Sons of Erin member, former Irishman of the Year, because I'm also putting his values into action. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, because veterans, people who are involved in Westfield and organizations like that, that is where my values have come from, and that is purely my inspiration for this from both sides of my grandparents.
Thank you so much. And it's time for the candidates' closing statements. You have 2 minutes each. Mr. Keys, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you for having this event so the people of Westfield can see us candidates and learn more about us and make informed decisions. I look forward to the next debate in October. When I retired from the military after 20 years on active duty, my family and I could have lived anywhere, but we chose the city of Westfield, not only to be near family and friends, but because we felt that it was a great community to raise our son. And after 7 years of living here, there is no doubt that we made the right decision. I understand the issues of Westfield and will fight for more money for roads and schools, two of our city's biggest concerns, but not by raising taxes, but by getting the state to reprioritize its spending so that cities and towns don't have to raise our property taxes every year. You know, I'm a homeowner, and I understand firsthand paying property taxes, and it's not always fun. I'm also vested in the public school system, having a son starting 3rd grade at Southampton Road Elementary School. And I also know the state charges us 23 cents a gallon for every gallon I put in my vehicle. You know, for my 20 years of military experience of working with many different people to accomplish what needs to be done, and being a homeowner and a father of a child in our public school system, I know I'm the best person to represent the city of Westfield. If you would like to know more about me, please go to peasforstaterep.com or email me with any question. I love listening to the people of Westfield and to hear their concerns. If you vote for me, I will continue to work as hard as I have during this campaign to advocate for the city of Westfield at the State House. I'm not a politician. I feel I am the best candidate for the job. I'm Kelly Pease, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd and would be humbled to be your voice in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flaherty, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you. I was watching a short Muhammad Ali film the other day, and there's a quote that stuck out to me. It was, "Service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth." So that's why I'm here, because out of all of our commonalities, our responsibility to each other has to be the most compelling. So I'm here for everyone, and I'm committed to representation because of the aspect of personally helping people. I'm going to keep working hard to earn your vote, but until then, please do reach out, seek out information about us, talk to us, and I'd be more than happy to help you in any way possible. When I talk to a family who's working super overtime to help their kids with IEPs and learning needs that aren't being met, I care about it even if it's not my family. When I hear about how Massachusetts has the highest per capita public debt burden of any state in the nation, you know, my heart hurts because it's the coming generations, mine included, that are going to have to clean up that mess. When I talk to first generation Americans who have continually been faced poor treatment in some areas, all of our minds should be considering the solutions. Every month for about 4 months before school, I worked a job where I got to know a lot of Westfield's homeless population, and all of us should be concerned about addressing those underlying issues and getting people the help they need. When seniors are leaving our state in high numbers due to the costs, I think about not only them, but their families who have to deal with that. And when good and loved businesses are struggling to stay open because of the burdens the state is placing on them, it affects all of us, even if we don't own a business. Your support, paired with a nonpartisan representation, can ensure Westfield can become part of the solution. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but I promise that in the State House, you're going to have a voice fighting for you, and here at home, you'll have someone eager to meet with you and help person to person in any way possible. So if I've answered all your questions tonight, which I probably haven't. I ask for your vote.
Thank you so
I'll
much,
put more on the website soon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Valeri. Mr. Garlow, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
So my roots have been on Montgomery Road for generations, and I grew up in the same father my house did, and that's where they will be staying in the future. I have a nephew in the school system now, actually in 7th grade, and one more who will be entering it soon. So I take on all these issues with the other families that are now. But I brought my skills back home, as I said earlier, because this is where I can maximize my impact. Not Albany, not DC. I can maximize it most at home and forming partnerships that we need in Boston. I know Westfield best, and I know that I can be the one to form these partnerships and also be there in this next year of unfortunate relief that will be going forward. Hopefully it isn't much longer than that, but that will need real cooperation and that will need real partnerships. That isn't just having someone's name in your phone, but having the ability to step into the room and be welcomed into those negotiations. And Westfield's going to need its fair share, even more so than it already has in the past, and I am the candidate to make sure that we take that home, because at the end, this is the nature of that job. It is about, we advocate on our own issues, of course, day by day, but it is about bringing the bread home for Westfield, and that is what I would be there to do. I thank the organization for this opportunity, because I know that, as I said earlier, it's tough to get your message out as a first-time candidate, and my family isn't one that's ever been in politics or in even business in Westfield. And I can speak to the working class families and also every single issue that is ongoing now, because I'm experiencing it as well as soon as I move back.
Thank you so much. Now some final words. Sorry. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that I'm going to be answering all these questions and more on the website and social media, and I'm going to continue talking to people throughout the coming months to work to earn your vote. So thank you.
Now some final words from the president of Westfield Taxpayers Association, Brian Richards.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for the time, effort, and sacrifice that you put in for running. Much appreciated. Thank you to the folks in the audience here that are watching this tonight. It's been a good night, and hopefully you've learned a lot. I'd like to remind everybody that we have 2 more candidate forums scheduled. One would be a senatorial debate forum on October 8th, and the second would be with these folks on October 13th, the second state forum. So that would be something to check our website and stuff like that. So the other thing is, I'd like to remind everybody that the Taxpayers Association is promoting 3 petitions that will help allocate funds to our road. That was kind of one of the first things that got mentioned on the state funding. So you can learn more about those and help by signing the petitions if you go to www.askwestfield.com. Thank you, Agnes. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Pete and Kenny. And thanks to our wonderful sponsor, Westfield Savings Bank. Thanks.